Live NFL trivia every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge for a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. If you ask Minnesota fans what one of their biggest rivalry games of the year is, even though it's not annually, odds are you would get quite a few people who would say that it's their rivalry against none other than the Penn State and Nittany Lions. The two schools have met 16 times in the Big Ten, and every time they meet, you can be sure that the battle for the governor's victory bell will be a heated one. Even though the rivalry has only existed for 30 years, the two schools have had their fair share of memorable games, giving the rivalry the prestige that it does today. You have the 2006 game, where Penn State won 28-27 in overtime after Minnesota missed an extra point in the overtime period. You have the 2016 game, where Penn State won 29-26 in overtime after Saquon Barkley scored the game-winning touchdown for the Nittany Lions on the very first play of Penn State's overtime possession. You had the 2019 game, where Penn State was undefeated and ranked number 4 in the nation, and yet Minnesota pulled off the upset, thanks to an amazing game by wide receiver Rashad Bateman, who had 203 yards receiving for the Golden Gophers. Safe to say, this rivalry has had its fair share of great moments. And the rivalry started all the way back in 1993, when the two teams not only kicked off conference play against each other, but kicked off their entire regular season against each other. The game, held at Beaver Stadium on the campus of Penn State, was won quite handily by the Nittany Lions, as they took it by a final score of 38-20. Penn State's first game against Minnesota, and first game in the Big Ten for that matter, was everything that they could have hoped for, thanks to a 165-yard, 4-touchdown performance by wide receiver Bobby Ingram, who set a school record for most receiving touchdowns in a game, and had the second most receiving yards of any Nittany Lion ever. Penn State led from wire to wire, scoring a touchdown not even 2 minutes into the game, and never looking back from that point on. It was a dominant performance where they forced the Golden Gophers to throw 4 interceptions, where they held onto the ball for over 37 minutes, and where they forced Minnesota to put the ball on the ground an additional 4 times. But what you might not know is that the 1993 meeting between the two teams was not the first time that Penn State and Minnesota were supposed to play each other in a football game. Far from it, in fact. Because as it turns out, the two schools were supposed to play each other in a home-and-home series 1 decade before that, and were supposed to square off in the 1980s, way before Penn State had any aspirations of dropping their independent status to join a conference. As for why the game never materialized, well, let's just say that there was quite the dispute about how the finances should work out, which led to the governor's victory bell not getting off the ground until the two schools were forced to play each other due to contractual and conference obligations. Because this is the story behind the false start to the iconic rivalry between the Penn State Nittany Lions and the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Before I talk about the cancellation of the series, we need some context to understand why these games were even scheduled in the first place, because when you break it down as to how and why this fell apart, a lot of it might seem bizarre on the surface. In the 1970s, it was clear that the Golden Gophers needed a dome venue, because Memorial Stadium, which opened in 1924, was falling apart, and fans were not showing up to the games like they used to, as even though the team averaged upwards of 60,000 fans per game in the 1960s, for much of the 70s, that number was cut in half. Combined with a poor stadium and poor weather, the move to the Metrodome became inevitable, and when the Metrodome opened up during the 1982 season, that's where the Golden Gophers called home. As a side note, over on my NFL channel, I talked a while ago about the construction of the Metrodome as it pertained to the Minnesota Vikings. So if you want to learn more about that, click the card in the upper right corner. Now, with the Metrodome open, the question for Minnesota became how you get the fans to make the 2-mile trek and go off campus to visit the venue. And the way to do that, in the eyes of their athletic director, was to schedule some great opponents. Put together a gauntlet of a schedule to entice people to come to the Metrodome, especially because the Golden Gophers needed to draw high crowds, since their contract with the Metrodome was, shall we say, less than ideal, as they didn't have priority and gave up a ton of their revenue to the venue. And what's more likely to draw more people? A game against a small school, or a game against one of the top schools in the country, like Penn State? Obviously, a marquee opponent is the way to go if you want to achieve this mission. With that, Minnesota and Penn State were set to play each other, with the two schools playing a home-and-home against each other in 1985 and 1986. Under this agreement, Penn State would come to Minneapolis in 1985, and Minnesota would return the favor and come to State College in 1986. So everything was good to go, right? The first ever meeting between the two schools, separated by just under 1,000 miles, was set for the Metrodome in 1985. Even though the venue was going to be 4 years old by that point, the mission of getting people to come out seemed to be accomplished, because you knew that a game like this was going to draw a crowd. However, Minnesota quickly realized that they ran into a problem when they maybe, just maybe, got a bit too ambitious with their schedule. You see, there's playing a tough schedule that challenges you, and that gives you good competition outside of conference play. And then, there's whatever the heck Minnesota was doing. Because at the same time that they scheduled Penn State for a home-and-home in 1985 and 1986, they did the same with another team. And that team? None other than the Oklahoma Sooners. Remember, back in 1985, you got 3 non-conference games. That was it. So to play Penn State and Oklahoma in back-to-back weeks in consecutive seasons was quite the bold move, especially because under head coach Barry Switzer, Oklahoma was consistently one of the best teams in all of college football. If you know how the 1985 season ended up playing out, you'll know that it ended with the Orange Bowl, which was the de facto title game between Oklahoma and Penn State. From 1975 to 80, right when this series was scheduled, Oklahoma had 6 consecutive seasons ranked inside the top 7 of the AP poll, including a number 1 ranking in 1975 and 3 consecutive third-place rankings from 1978 to 80, and they were showing no signs of slowing down. Combine that with Penn State having 10 finishes inside the top 10 in the past 12 seasons from 1971 to 82, and Minnesota's athletic director realized that he might have been overambitious with this plan of his. Desperately, he realized as the games drew closer his mistake, and tried to cancel the series with Penn State and Oklahoma, but neither school was budging. The games were on, and the Oklahoma series wound up being played, going exactly as expected, as Minnesota got swept in the home-and-home, with a return leg in Norman being a 63-0 defeat. But even though all hope was lost for the Oklahoma series and trying to get that canceled, they were not giving up hope to try and get the Penn State series called off. Maybe they'd have to play one of the series, but they sure as heck weren't going to play both of them. And with that came the part that, in all honesty, doesn't make any sense when you come to think about it for more than 5 seconds. Because Minnesota and Penn State came to a pretty significant dispute when it came to their finances and how the money would be given out to each of these schools. You see, the two schools had no idea how the gate receipts should be divided up. Per Big Ten rules, the visiting team received either a guarantee of $150,000 for every game that they played on the road, or 50% of the gate receipts, whichever one was higher. And for Minnesota, that 50% when they went on the road to Penn State could be absolutely massive, seeing as the Nittany Lions regularly sold out their 80,000-seat stadium. Whatever Minnesota made by selling out the Metrodome, Penn State made over $150,000 more. However, Penn State was unwilling to pay out 50% of the receipts. They didn't have to abide by these rules. Those were Big Ten rules, and last time I checked, Penn State was an independent, not in the conference. Minnesota was insistent on getting 50% of the gate receipts from the 1986 leg, and Penn State was insistent on not giving them that, and either giving them a lower percentage or a flat fee. And once that disagreement happened, Minnesota and Penn State mutually agreed to call off the series. Now here's the part that makes absolutely no sense about this. When you're drawing up a contract with anything, what's the first thing, outside of maybe duration, that comes up? Obviously, it's money. You need to know how much money the party in question is going to make. You need to know how they're going to be paid. And you need to know all of the important financial details. So you're telling me that Penn State and Minnesota scheduled this series a while ago. I couldn't find, despite my best efforts, the exact year that this series was scheduled, but the series was first mentioned all the way back in 1979. And you're telling me that despite scheduling the series that long ago, that not until April of 1984, roughly 1 year away from the game, did money come up? How does that make any sense? It would be one thing if there was an issue with the finer details that might not have been foreseen at the time that was causing the holdup. A great example of that came with Washington and Florida State, when the Seminoles were supposed to travel to the Pacific Northwest, but backed out because the cost of flying increased significantly from the time the agreement was signed to the time the game was supposed to be played, making it impractical to honor the agreement. You can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. But nothing, and I mean nothing whatsoever, was unforeseen about this. How do you draft a contract and not specify how much money is going to be paid out, and whether it's going to be a flat fee or a percentage of the receipts? Outside of when the game is going to be played, that is quite literally the number one most important detail, and Minnesota and Penn State just forgot to discuss it until it got to this point? Again, it's absolutely baffling, but whatever gets you out of the deal, I suppose. Regardless, with that dispute that probably never should have come up in the first place, or at the very least, should have been discussed when the contract was first being signed, and not more than half a decade after the fact, the series was off. Minnesota and Penn State would no longer be playing each other in 1985 and 1986 in a home-and-home, and would be left to their own devices to fill up the newly opened date on the schedule, which I'm sure Minnesota was thrilled about, seeing as they were trying to cancel the series for quite some time, and seeing as they didn't want their whole team dead before conference play, with Penn State and Oklahoma in back-to-back weeks and in back-to-back seasons. Obviously, despite the initial hiccup, we'd see the two teams play many times over the years, as once Penn State joined the Big Ten, where the conference, and not the individual athletic directors, dictate the schedule and how it works, the two teams have met roughly once every 3 years, with Penn State leading the all-time series between the schools 10-6 as of this video, having never trailed in the series at any point. But even though the bad blood between the Nittany Lions and the Golden Gophers started in 1993, in reality, it started a decade and a half before that, thanks to a bizarre contract dispute and a home-and-home series gone horribly wrong. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.